My name is Beverly Goodwin. I'm 39 years old. 6 months ago, my mother looked at me across a Sunday dinner table in front of my father and my brother and said the one sentence she had been rehearsing my whole life. She said, "You'll never be as good as Michael." I put my fork down, and for the first time in 15 years, I said the sentence I should have said much earlier. I told her, "Then tell him to pay the bills, because I'm not sending money anymore." What happened next should have made no sense. My mother looked up at me, confused, almost offended, and said, "What money, Beverly? We've never received a single dollar from you." That was the moment everything in my family split open, because one of us was lying, and for the first time in my life, it wasn't me. What I didn't know then was that 6 months later, in a ballroom filled with 300 people, my brother would stand under crystal chandeliers, wearing a tuxedo and a practiced smile, and discover that I was done protecting him. By the end of that night, the hospital board, the donors, my parents, and every person in that room would know the truth. And the cruelest part? I had only just learned it myself. So if you've ever been the reliable one in your family, the one who pays, fixes, absorbs, forgives, and keeps the peace while someone else gets the praise, stay with me, because this story is about money, but not really. It's about what happens when the daughter nobody notices finally stops being useful. And if you think you know where this is going, you don't. It was a Sunday in October. My mother had made the same pot roast she had made every October Sunday since I was 12. Same carrots, same pearl onions, slightly burned because she always forgot them for just a minute too long. Same cloth napkins with the blackberry stains she refused to throw away, as if replacing them would mean admitting time had passed. I had flown in from Boston that morning. My parents' dining room looked exactly the way it had looked 15 years earlier. The chandelier still hung too low over the table. The wallpaper was still fading near the window. And on the wall behind my father's chair, still in the same heavy brass frame, hung the photograph of my brother in his white coat from medical school graduation. It had always been there, like a family altar. Michael was talking when I sat down. Of course he was. He was describing a charitable donation, $50,000, he said, with the soft modesty of a man who wanted very badly to be admired for not seeming to want admiration. He said he had given it to the children's cardiology program at his hospital. My father nodded with quiet pride. My mother smiled in the way mothers smile when the son they built their identity around gives them another reason to believe they were right all along. I waited until the pause in conversation and said politely that my firm had just closed an $18 million commitment to fund a cardiac wing in the same state. It wasn't bragging. It was context. It was also true. My mother gave a little chuckle, a chuckle. Then she said, "Money isn't the same as saving lives, sweetie. You'll never be quite as good as your brother, but we love you anyway." My father looked down at his plate. Michael gave that false, shining smile he used in hospital hallways and donor receptions. "Mom," he said lightly, "be nice." That was when I put my fork down. There are moments in life where 15 years of silence stop being dignity and start becoming self-betrayal. I had reached mine. I looked at my mother and said calmly, "Then tell him to pay the bills, because I'm not sending money anymore." The room didn't explode. Families almost never explode. The worst things in families are delivered quietly, between the gravy and the green beans, while everyone pretends chewing is more urgent than truth. My mother blinked twice. Then she said, "What money, Beverly? We've never received a single dollar from you." Not angry, not defensive, genuinely confused. That was what frightened me, because my mother was a terrible liar. She always had been. She telegraphed everything. If she had hidden a Christmas gift, you could see it in her face. If she disliked someone at church, the corners of her mouth gave her away before she spoke. If she was hurt, offended, or pretending, you always knew. But not this time. This time there was nothing. No flinch, no hesitation, no calculation, just confusion. And that was when I realized something I should have realized much earlier. My mother hadn't been lying to me. Someone else had been lying to her. I drove back that night in a rental car from Cleveland with the radio off. For the first 3 hours, I replayed the dinner over and over again, but not the insult, not the laughter, not even Michael's smile. What haunted me was my mother's face when she said she had never received the money. I had been wiring $3,000 a month for 5 years. $3,000 every month, 60 months, $180,000, not as a gift, not as a favor, as family support. It had started when my father's prescriptions began stacking up, and my mother mentioned, in one of those carefully casual ways older women mention serious trouble, that retirement had become a little tighter than expected. I knew what that meant. It meant they were sinking, and my mother would rather choke than say so plainly. so I fixed it, quietly. I arranged for a joint account in Ohio with my parents' names on it. My brother Michael was listed as an authorized signer because he lived nearby, and at the time, it seemed practical. He was the doctor, the local son, the responsible one, according to everyone except facts. I transferred $3,000 into that account every month without fail. Every first business day. No missed months, no pauses, no negotiations. If they needed extra, I sent extra. When my mother mentioned roof damage after a spring storm, I wired $18,000. When my father needed help with co-pays, I covered those too. I never announced it, never attached strings, never brought it up at Christmas, never once asked for gratitude. I had spent my whole life learning that if I wanted peace in my family, I had to be useful without becoming visible. So I was. And now, according to my mother, none of it had ever reached them. By the time I stopped at a rest area in western Pennsylvania that night, it was raining hard enough to blur the yellow parking lot lights into halos. I stood under the awning with a paper cup of terrible coffee and did the math again in my head. $180,000. Gone. Not to my parents. Somewhere else. That was the moment the sister in me stepped aside and the CFO took over. Because I don't panic about money. I trace it. If you had met my mother 20 years ago, you would have understood the architecture of our family instantly. She loved us both, I think. But she admired only one of us. My brother Michael was the family miracle, the golden son, the bright one, the one whose achievements could be displayed to others. He was the child my mother could mention at church and receive applause for. I was the child who handled things, the efficient one, the calm one, the practical one, the daughter who was described with words like dependable, organized, sensible, as though I had not built a life, only a filing system. When I was 8 years old, I came home with a perfect score on a math test. I remember running into the kitchen with it still warm from my hand. My mother looked at the page, smiled vaguely, and said, "Oh, lovely. Did your brother help you?" Michael was in the den watching cartoons. He had not helped me with anything in his life. But that was the story in our house. If something exceptional happened near me, somehow it still reflected him. When Michael got into medical school, my parents pulled $40,000 out of savings. When I got into business school, I took loans. When Michael graduated residency, my mother stood up during coffee hour at church and announced, "We have a doctor now. Our family finally has a doctor." People clapped. When I finished my MBA, she sent flowers to my apartment with a card that said, "So proud of you, sweetie. Will you be home for Christmas?" That was my role. Never the headline, always the infrastructure. And children who grow up outside the light learn to measure themselves in different currencies. In finished work, in early mornings, in resilience, in the weight of an envelope mailed without a return address. By 30, I had stopped expecting my mother to be proud of me. By 35, I had stopped expecting her to truly see me at all. But I still believed somehow that if I helped enough, if I behaved enough, if I absorbed enough, the family would remain intact. I was wrong, because what I had actually done was build a bridge for my brother to rob me from. I just didn't know that yet. The second piece of the truth arrived on a Monday morning, wearing the voice of a friend who didn't know she was handing me a weapon. Her name is Helena Vaughn. She runs oversight for a hospital foundation in Ohio, and we met 9 years ago at a philanthropy conference in New York while hiding from a man who wanted to corner us about tax exemptions over hotel bar Chardonnay. We'd been friends ever since. I called her that morning about a grant structure unrelated to my family. We handled the business in 4 minutes. Then she said casually, "By the way, Fairmont Regional wants you to speak at the gala." I leaned back in my chair. "What gala?" "The Wing Gala. Your firm's the lead donor. Your brother's being honored too. It's all coming together beautifully." I felt something cold move through me. "My brother's being honored for what?" She laughed lightly, still unaware. "Apparently he matched part of your firm's commitment. Very elegant, actually. $250,000 personal pledge. Makes for a great donor narrative." I went silent. She said, "You didn't know?" No, I did not know. Because 2 years earlier, the same brother had called me at 11 at night asking if I could cover $600 for our father's knee replacement copay because he was, in his words, between payrolls. Michael did not have $250,000. Michael barely had $600. So if his name was attached to a $250,000 pledge connected to my firm's project, I already knew one thing: that money had not come from his salary. And suddenly, the missing $180,000 had somewhere to look. Helena, still speaking, asked if I wanted her to send the draft program. I said yes. Then I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the window in my office for a very long time. Outside, the harbor was gray and still. Inside, A very old instinct in me finally died. It was the instinct to protect the family story. By Tuesday afternoon, I had walked 2 floors down to the office of our compliance director. His name was Marcus Webb, 60 years old, bald, immaculate, kind in the way some judges are kind, precisely, sparingly, with no interest in making dishonesty comfortable. Marcus drank tea, never coffee. He did not gossip. He did not speculate. He believed in evidence, paper trails, and consequences. I closed his office door and sat down. He looked at me once and said, "How serious?" Serious enough that I wanted on the record. That got his attention. I told him exactly what I needed: a compliance audit on all wire transfers from my private account into the joint account in Ohio. 5 years, $3,000 per month. And second, verification of any donor records, matching gifts, or pledge documents submitted in my brother's name related to the Fairmont Regional Cardiac Wing Project. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Your brother is a connected party. This will trigger conflict review. I know. If there's a finding, this won't stay private. I know." He held my gaze for a moment longer, then pulled a yellow legal pad toward him. "Do you want legal looped in?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I want a paper trail strong enough to survive a courtroom." Marcus nodded. 3 weeks for preliminary audit. Faster if the records are sloppy. "They'll be sloppy," I said. I didn't know then how right I was. There is a kind of courage nobody celebrates because it doesn't look cinematic. It looks like a woman in a dark blazer asking her compliance officer to investigate her own brother. It looks like choosing documentation over denial. It looks boring, which is exactly why it changes lives. That Wednesday, I called my mother. I kept my voice neutral. "Mom, that joint account we opened a few years ago, do you check it?" She sounded almost amused. "Oh, honey, no. Michael handles all that. Have you ever seen the statements?" A pause. Not long, but long enough. "Why are you asking? Just answer the question." "Well, no. Your brother takes care of things. He's very good with numbers." I closed my eyes. Michael had once failed algebra twice in high school. He was not good with numbers. He was good with confidence. And for some people, confidence is all the proof they ever ask for. "Mom," I said, "did he tell you he paid for the roof last year?" "Yes, he did." I looked at my screen. I had the wire in front of me. $18,000. Sent in May. Memo. Roof repair. "Did he tell you where the money came from?" Her tone sharpened. "What is this about? Are you still upset about Sunday?" "It isn't about Sunday." "Well, your brother does so much for us." There it was again. Every question about Michael became, somehow, a moral failing on my part. I knew the dance. I had performed it half my life. This time I stepped off the floor. "Mom, I'll talk to you later." I hung up before she could turn it into another speech about family. Then I opened the account portal. My mother's login had never been changed. The password was still the same one I had created years earlier, which meant exactly what I feared. She had never used it. Never once. She had trusted completely. And trust, in the wrong hands, is just unlocked access with sentimental branding. Friday morning, I called Helena back and told her I would speak at the gala. She sounded relieved. Then I said, "I need one favor." "Name it." "Don't announce Michael's donor status before my remarks." Silence. Then, "Beverly, what's going on?" "I don't know everything yet." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." She let out a slow breath. "You're asking me to reorder a black tie donor program because you may be about to blow something up." "Yes." Another silence. Then she said very quietly, "All right. I trust you." I thanked her and hung up. At my office window, the harbor moved under a slate-colored sky. A tanker was cutting slowly east. The city was doing what cities do, continuing, regardless of whether your personal life is collapsing. I remember standing there and realizing something with perfect clarity. There are moments in a woman's life when she stops asking permission to know what she already knows. That Friday was one of mine. The gala was 5 weeks away. The audit would take 3. I had just enough time to learn the truth, and exactly enough time to choose how public I wanted it to become. Around that same time, my brother's wife found me. Or maybe it's more accurate to say she finally had a reason to. Her name was Lauren. We had never really spoken beyond pleasantries at weddings, holidays, and the occasional family event where she stood beside Michael looking elegant and tired. I was at a conference hotel in Chicago, pouring coffee before a panel, when she stepped beside me and said, "You're Beverly." I turned. She extended her hand. "I'm Lauren, Michael's wife, for about 2 more months." That got my full attention. She asked if I had 10 minutes. We found a bench in the hallway. She skipped small talk entirely, which made me like her immediately. In 7 minutes, she told me 3 things. First, she was filing for divorce. Second, she believed Michael had a gambling problem, sports betting mostly, through an online book in Delaware. Third, she had seen a repeating transfer pattern that looked suspiciously like money meant for someone else. Then she looked directly at me and said, "You send money to your parents, don't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She nodded once. I thought so. Then she reached into her bag and gave me her card. "When you're ready," she said, "I have the documents." There is a form of intimacy between women who have been lied to by the same man. It does not require trust-building exercises. It does not need warm-up conversation. It begins in the middle, and it moves straight toward truth. I put her card in my wallet beside my license. I had a feeling I would need it. I did, sooner than I thought. Marcus sent the preliminary audit 3 weeks later at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I was sitting on my couch in Cambridge with a glass of wine I hadn't touched. The windows behind me faced the river. Outside, a Shell crew moved past in the dark like a line of shadows. I opened the attachment. The numbers were so clean they were almost obscene. 5 years of inbound transfers from me, $180,000 total. Then outbound distributions, not to my mother, not to my father, not to roof contractors, pharmacies, doctors, utility companies, or anything remotely connected to care. Instead, a sports betting platform out of Delaware, $94,000, a cryptocurrency exchange between 2021 and 2023, $38,000. My brother's personal checking account through steady, smaller deposits designed not to attract attention. $48,000. $0 to my parents. Zero. None of the roof money reached the roof. None of the medical support reached medicine. None of the monthly support reached the people it was meant for. I read the report once, then twice. A third time, slower. Each line made the same point more brutally than the one above it. My brother had not stolen from me in some dramatic, one-time betrayal. He had built a system. He had used my reliability as revenue. He had used my parents as cover. He had used my silence as protection. And because I had spent so many years being the dependable one, no one had ever imagined I might verify anything. I finished the wine. Then I called my father. He answered from the garage. I could hear a ball game in the background. "Dad, can we talk privately?" A door closed. The radio softened. "Of course, honey." I took a breath. "The joint account. Has Michael been handling all of it?" He hesitated only briefly. "Your brother's been very kind." Kind. That word nearly broke something in me. "Has Mom ever seen the statements?" "No. We don't really do online banking." "Dad, did you know he was giving you your own money in cash?" Silence. Not ignorance this time. Something worse. The silence of a man who had decided, somewhere along the line, that not looking was easier than what looking might cost. Finally, he said very softly, "Honey, he's doing his best." There it was. The family translation for, "I know enough to be afraid." I closed my eyes. My father had been a bookkeeper for 31 years. He had balanced other people's ledgers to the penny. He knew what missing money meant. If he hadn't asked questions, it was not because he didn't understand. It was because asking would have forced him to choose between the son he admired and the daughter he had underestimated. And my father had never been trained for that kind of courage. He loved me. I have never doubted that. But loving a daughter and standing up for her are not the same skill. He had only ever practiced one of them. I told him I loved him. He told me he'd see me at the gala and that he planned to wear his blue tie. When we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a very long time. The evidence was no longer theoretical. Now it had a shape, and soon it would have witnesses. Marcus's full due diligence report arrived 2 days later. That was when the story stopped being about diverted family money and became something much larger. Federal tax liens, $42,000, a civil settlement involving another sports book in New Jersey. A released lien tied to a vehicle purchase covered by what county records described only as a family loan. Then came the donor file. Michael had submitted a letter on hospital letterhead claiming a personal matching pledge of $250,000 toward the cardiology project. There was no such pledge in our firm's records, no transfer, no funding vehicle, no escrow, no commitment instrument, nothing. He had self-reported a $250,000 gift that did not exist and attached his name to my firm's donation as if proximity to legitimacy could become legitimacy through repetition. And the foundation, trusting the title before the man, had printed it. Gold foil, cream cardstock, professional typography. That was when I understood something about my brother that I had never fully named before. He was no longer just a liar. He was a man who had started believing that presentation could outrun proof. And people like that become dangerous when cornered, because the lie is no longer a tool. It is the architecture of the self. The gala program arrived by courier on a Friday morning. I made coffee before opening it. The envelope was thick and expensive. The program inside clicked when I set it on the counter. Goodwin Hartley Family Office. Lead commitment, $18 million. Then beneath it, Dr. Michael Goodwin, MD. Matching gift partner. Personal pledge, $25,000. Next to it, a glossy professional photograph of him in a white coat, smiling like Virtue had hired a photographer. I stared at it for a long time. I remember thinking, a man who prints his lies this beautifully has grown very used to not being challenged. I emailed Marcus one line. Please confirm, in writing on letterhead, that no matching pledge exists from Michael Goodwin in our records. He responded in 12 minutes. He confirmed it, officially. That was the moment the decision became final. I could call Michael privately. He would deny everything. I could call the hospital quietly. They would remove his name, protect the institution, and bury the embarrassment. I could call law enforcement and let the machine handle him from there. But none of those options gave my parents the truth. None of them gave me back the years, and none of them answered the question that had lived in me since I was 8 years old. If the evidence were undeniable, public, documented, impossible to interrupt, would my mother finally see me? I wasn't going to Ohio for revenge. I was going for a record. 3 weeks before the gala, I met Michael for lunch in Boston. Public enough to keep him careful, private enough to keep him from performing. I chose the restaurant deliberately. My brother loved audiences. I had no intention of giving him one. He arrived 10 minutes late in a navy blazer and the relaxed expression of a man who believed he could still charm his way through consequences. He ordered a martini. I ordered tea. Then I slid a plain gray folder across the table. I know about Delaware, I said. I know about the crypto. I know the money never reached Mom and Dad, and I know the $250,000 pledge doesn't exist. He looked at me for 4 seconds. I counted, then he laughed. A big laugh. Too big. Beverly, he said, you've always been dramatic. No, I said, I've always been quiet. That's different. That line landed harder than I expected. I watched his jaw tighten. He took a sip of his martini and leaned back. Mom and Dad will never believe you. That's why I'm not asking them to. He stared at me. I continued. Withdraw the fake pledge before the gala, quietly. That's the only private grace you're getting. He shook his head slowly, almost pitying. You'll tear this family apart. I looked at him and felt something settle in me permanently. You already did, I said. I'm just refusing to finance it. For the first time in our lives, he had no immediate line ready. I watched the small muscle twitch under his left eye. Fear, not remorse, just fear. He left without paying the bill. I paid it. And as I signed the receipt, I remember thinking, that is the last unpaid expense of his I will ever cover. After that lunch, the phone calls started. My mother left voicemails, then more voicemails. My brother left messages that began controlled and ended trembling. I listened to one from my mother. Beverly, your brother is very upset. He says you accused him of terrible things. We did not raise you to do this. We are a family. That phrase, we are a family. In my house, it had never meant love. It meant absorb this quietly. It meant let this go. It meant your pain is less important than our image. I did not call her back. Not Saturday, not Sunday, not Monday. Then Monday morning, she called my office line. I answered because I thought something might be wrong. Her voice was smaller than usual. Beverly, have you logged into the account? I leaned back slowly in my chair. Why are you asking? Because your brother asked if I had. There it was. The moment truth finally touched the edge of her life. I can't remember the password, she said. Reset it. A pause. I don't want to. Of course not. Because opening the account wouldn't just reveal what Michael had done. It would reveal what she had refused to notice. And those are often harder truths to survive. I softened my voice, not for her, for myself. I'll see you at the gala, Mom. Beverly, please. I love you. I'll see you in Ohio. Then I hung up. Some mothers say, we didn't raise you to do this, when they mean, we raised you to stay manageable. I had stopped being manageable, and they were about to find out what that looked like. A week before the gala, Lauren sent me 11 attachments and 1 line of text. Thought you should have these on your terms. I opened them one by one. Home equity withdrawals from their house, credit card charges, liquor store transactions, collections letters, sportsbook statements, divorce filings. Then, at the very end, a screenshot of a text message Michael had sent to an old residency friend. The date was 2 years earlier, 11:47 p.m. It read, I'm drowning, but my sister thinks she's funding Mom's insulin. LMAO. I read it 3 times. There are sentences that do not wound you in the dramatic way movies teach us to expect. They don't knock the breath out of you. They don't don't make you collapse. They simply alter the temperature of your blood. After that message, something final in me went cold. Not rage, not heartbreak, recognition. Because whatever remained of sibling loyalty had been built on the assumption that somewhere under the lying, somewhere under the theft, somewhere under the vanity, there was still some private line he wouldn't cross. There wasn't. He had laughed at my care. He had mocked my trust. He had turned my love for our parents into a punchline for another man. That screenshot changed the nature of the coming night. Until then, I had intended to correct the record. After that, I intended to end the performance. The day before the gala, I ironed a charcoal wool dress I had owned for 4 years. Long sleeves, clean lines, a collar sharp enough to look almost severe. My mother had once told me it made me look like a lawyer. She had not meant it kindly. I wore it anyway. I polished my shoes. I took out the diamond earrings my grandmother left me, the pair my mother had wanted and never received. My grandmother had understood something about women in our family that the rest of us took decades to learn. Affection is one thing, discernment is another. I wore no red lipstick, no dramatic jewelry, nothing that could be mistaken for revenge. I wasn't going there to be theatrical. I was going there to be indisputable. My remarks were 1 page, 4 paragraphs, every sentence checked by Marcus, every claim supported by a document I could place under fluorescent light without blinking. Helena called that evening. Last chance to back out, she said. This will follow him for life. He used our parents as cover for theft, I said. I'm not the one following him. I'm the one who stopped. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. I put the folder in my carry-on, and for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not well, but enough, because the waiting was almost over. I drove to Ohio on a Saturday in April. 12 hours. No music. Just a podcast on behavioral finance because I needed a voice in the car that discussed risk as if it were mathematical and not hereditary. Somewhere in Indiana, I thought about my mother's piano. She had sold it when Michael was 14 to fund a summer science program for him. She had used to play after church on Sundays, softly, for herself. She never played again after it left the house. I wondered, not for the first time, how many women disappear in small installments and then spend years calling it motherhood. By the time I reached the hotel attached to the gala venue, it was just after 4. I checked in, hung the dress, drank a glass of water, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the folder in my bag. I didn't rehearse the speech. I had stopped rehearsing 4 days earlier. There comes a point where repetition stops helping and starts softening the blade. I needed the blade. At 6 o'clock, I walked into the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, string quartet, champagne, donor wall at the north end of the room, covered by draped fabric waiting for the unveiling. 300 people in tuxedos, gowns, silk, satin, money, and assumptions. My mother saw me first. She set down her glass and came toward me fast. Beverly, please, she said, low and urgent. Don't make a scene tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. I looked at her calmly. I'm here as CFO of Goodwin Hartley. I speak at 8:15. She blinked. That same blink from the dinner table. Then Michael appeared beside her, smiling too brightly. Hey, sis, he said. Let's just be cool tonight. I met his eyes. I'm always cool, Michael. 3 steps behind them stood my father. He said nothing, but he did something I had never seen him do before. He nodded at me. Not as a father greeting a daughter, as one professional acknowledging another. It was the first honest gesture he had ever made toward me in a room where Michael was present. And strangely enough, it steadied me more than any speech could have. Of course we were seated together. The foundation had placed the Goodwins at one table like a centerpiece arrangement no one had checked for rot underneath. My mother, my father, Michael, Lauren, still technically his wife at the time, elegant and silent, me, and 3 hospital board members who had no idea they were about to witness a family autopsy between courses. Dinner was served. Beef, medium rare, green beans almondine, potatoes stacked into little architectural towers no one touched. Michael told the story about the grateful patient who sent him pears at Christmas. I had heard him tell it before. He used the same laugh at the same moment. Sweat was already visible at his collar. Lauren drank wine and said almost nothing. My mother kept looking at me, then away. My father cut his food into very small pieces and ate almost none of it. At 7:58, Helena passed behind my chair and touched my shoulder. 15 minutes. My mother finally turned to me and asked, "You're really speaking?" "Yes, Mom." She looked to my father for interruption, rescue, moderation, some masculine authority to put me back in place. He set down his fork, looked across the flowers at her, and said the quietest, bravest 4 words of his life. "Let her speak, Nancy." Nothing at that table sounded the same after that, because apologies do not always arrive in the form you waited for. Sometimes they arrive as permission given too late, and still, you take them. At 8:12, Helena stepped onto the stage. She welcomed the room, thanked the donors, praised the future of pediatric cardiac care, and introduced the evening's principal benefactors. When she said Goodwin Hartley Family Office and named the $18 million commitment, heads turned toward our table. I stayed still. Then she said, "Before the unveiling, our CFO, M. Beverly Goodwin, has requested the honor of speaking on behalf of the firm." The applause was polite. People clapped the way people clap at charity events when they are mostly thinking about dessert and valet timing. They had no idea what they were about to become part of. I stood, smoothed the front of my dress, walked to the stage. The carpet swallowed the sound of my heels. My heart was loud enough for only me to hear. At the podium, I placed the folder down. I never opened it. I didn't need to. I looked out across the ballroom, found my mother's face, and began. "Good evening. On behalf of Goodwin Hartley Family Office, thank you for being here tonight and for supporting the future of cardiac care in this community. My parents, Richard and Nancy Goodwin, are here this evening. My brother, Dr. Michael Goodwin, is also here. I need to correct one line in tonight's printed program. The $250,000 matching gift attributed to Dr. Michael Goodwin has not been received by this foundation. Our compliance office has confirmed that no such personal pledge exists in our records. That listing will be withdrawn. I also need to state, for the protection of this institution and in fairness to my parents, that for the past 5 years, I transferred $3,000 per month into a joint account intended for their support. A forensic audit has documented that those funds did not reach them. My parents were unaware. They were deceived for as long as I was. I am not here tonight to embarrass my family. I am here because this wing will carry our name, and I believe names on walls should mean what they claim to mean. The Goodwin Cardiology Wing is real. This institution's funding is real. The records will show which contributions are real as well. Thank you. I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. Truth, when documented, does not need volume. It only needs a microphone and a room full of people who can no longer pretend not to hear it. I stepped back from the podium, and then the silence hit. 4 seconds. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then somewhere at the back of the ballroom, a woman began to clap. Another joined. Then a table near the front. Then the applause spread. Not fast, not wild, but deliberate. Confused in some corners, understanding in others. Sympathy here, shock there, recognition everywhere. I turned toward my table. My mother was crying, not politely, not delicately. The cry of a woman who has just watched the family story she spent decades polishing shatter in public light. My father was holding her hand. Lauren sat very still, one hand around her glass, looking at me with the smallest nod I have ever received from another woman. And Michael was already walking toward the doors, not running, trying very hard to look like he wasn't running. A security officer in black stepped quietly behind him. He disappeared into the hallway. I never looked back. Not on stage, not that night, not ever again in the same way. Helena met me at the bottom of the steps. "Backstage," she said softly. "Now." I followed her into a small green room behind the ballroom. Mirror, chairs, water pitcher, framed print of a lake nobody in that room was looking at. I had just poured a glass when the door opened. My mother came in first, my father behind her. He closed the door. My mother stopped 2 feet inside as if the room itself were difficult to enter. She looked at the folder on the table and then at me. "Is it true?" I answered without drama. "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." She closed her eyes, then opened them again, older somehow than she had looked an hour before. "I said terrible things to you," she whispered. "I could have said yes. I could have listed them. I could have named decades. Instead I said, not tonight." She looked startled. I wasn't protecting her. I was protecting the moment from becoming another family scene where my pain got converted into her emotions. "Tomorrow," I said, "or next month, or next year, but not in this room. I'm not ready for that conversation tonight." My father took her hand, not to comfort her, to steady her. Then very quietly, he said, "Nancy, let's go." She touched the edge of the folder with 2 fingers, did not open it, did not argue, did not defend Michael. That, more than the tears, told me the spell was broken. They left. Helena came back in. "The press wants a statement. I'll do 2 questions. You sure?" "Yes." "Public, boring, controlled." She smiled. "That's my girl." I drank the entire glass of water in one go. It was the first thing I had finished all evening. Michael caught me in the hallway by coat check. Of course he did. That was always his instinct, to intercept the narrative before it settled. He was sweating through his shirt now. His face had lost color. The security officer stood about 10 feet behind him, close enough to matter. "You've destroyed me," he said. "No," I replied. "You did that yourself. You've destroyed Mom." "No, I stopped helping you lie to her. The hospital could take my license. Then that's between you and the hospital." His face changed, not into humility, into desperation. "Bev, please. I have a daughter. daughter. I looked at him and felt almost nothing. You have a daughter. You had parents. You had a wife. You had a hospital. And you had me. You used all of them. He shook his head. I was in trouble. You laughed about stealing from me. His expression flickered, so he knew which message I'd seen. That mattered more than he realized. Bev, I was your sister for 39 years, I said. Tonight, I'm just no longer your pipeline. That was the last full sentence I ever spoke to him in private. He called my name once more as I walked away. I did not turn around. Some endings don't need a final look. They need a door. The Monday after the gala was quieter than I expected. Institutions are very good at sounding calm while moving fast. The hospital issued a brief statement confirming the donor listing had been withdrawn and that an internal review was underway. The medical board acknowledged receipt of a complaint. Lauren formally filed for divorce. The county paper ran a front-page piece about a local physician under review. They didn't name him. They didn't have to. In small towns, omission is often louder than publication. By Friday, my firm announced an additional $100,000 gift to pediatric cardiology in the personal names of Richard and Nancy Goodwin. I wired it myself. Memo line, for Mom and Dad, with love from your daughter. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I was finished letting my care pass through anyone else's hands. Every document that needed to exist existed. Every record that needed correcting had been corrected. Every system that needed to move had begun moving. And when all of that was done, I made coffee and sat in silence. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. There is no champagne feeling at the end of an audit like that. Only completion. And completion, if you have waited long enough for it, can feel almost holy. My mother called the following Sunday morning. I answered on the second ring. I went to the bank yesterday, she said. I said nothing. I asked them to help me log in. I saw the statements. She stopped speaking. I stirred my coffee. Then she said the sentence I had needed all my life and no longer required to survive. I didn't raise you well. Her voice broke on the last word. And for the first time in my life, I let her keep speaking without rushing to comfort her. I wanted a son who was a doctor, she said. I wanted it so badly, I couldn't see the daughter I already had. That landed somewhere very old inside me. Not like healing. Healing is too pretty a word. It landed like truth entering a room that had been closed for decades. Then she said something else. Your father told me I made you into a ghost in my own house. That startled a laugh out of me. A small one. It startled her too, because my father had never been a man of many words. But when he finally found the right ones, they stayed. Start there, I told her. Say it once. Say it again next Sunday. We'll keep going. She cried. I did not. I listened for 9 minutes. Then we hung up. Late apologies are strange things. They do not arrive in time to spare you. But when they are real, they still matter. Not because they erase anything, because they prove the other person has finally stopped lying, to you, to themselves, or both. My father called a few weeks later and asked if I would meet him alone for coffee next time I was in Ohio. I said yes. We sat in a diner off Route 14 with paper placemats and coffee so hot it tasted faintly like metal. He looked older than he had before the gala. Not weaker, just more honest. Halfway through the second cup, he said, I knew something was wrong for about 2 years. I didn't know what. I was afraid to look. I nodded. That was enough. Then he said, I am proud of you, Beverly. I should have said it sooner. I'll keep saying it until you believe me. I looked down at my hands because I didn't know what else to do. I had waited for that sentence so long that when it finally came, it felt unfamiliar in the air, like hearing your name pronounced correctly by someone who had used it carelessly for years. I thanked him. Then I took the afternoon off. No meetings, no apology for it, no justification. Just time. Sometimes the greatest proof that a life is changing is that you stop immediately converting every emotional event into productivity. Sometimes you just go home, pour a glass of wine, and let the sentence arrive fully. I am proud of you. Late is still late, but late is not nothing. My brother lost nearly everything that summer. The medical board suspended his license pending investigation. The hospital placed him on unpaid leave. The civil claims multiplied. Lauren kept primary custody of their daughter. Michael moved back into my parents' house, into the guest room that had once been mine, my old room. My mother had painted over the pale blue I chose at 15, 6 months before the gala. She had painted it the color of a hospital corridor. Now it held the son for whom she had painted over me. There was a kind of poetry in that, though not the pretty kind. My father called one afternoon and said, He's not the same. I know, I told him. Will you come by and see us? I'll come see you and Mom, I said. I'll see Michael when he brings me a plan written in full sentences, not before. My father said only, understood. It was a new word from him. I noticed. I noticed everything after that, because once a family finally tells the truth, even small changes sound enormous. That summer, I set up a fiduciary trust for my parents, $5,000 a month, directly monitored, quarterly reviewed by an outside local firm I selected myself. No more joint accounts, no pass-throughs, no emotional bookkeeping disguised as love. My mother learned to read statements. The first time she went through one, she made the fiduciary explain it twice and took notes the second time. I respected her for that. Real repentance is not theatrical. It is administrative. It is showing up, learning the login, asking better questions, tolerating shame long enough to become competent. I visited every 2 months, 2 nights each time. I did not eat dinner at the house if Michael was there. Not out of pettiness, out of design. Boundaries are not revenge. They are architecture. And I had spent enough years living inside somebody else's blueprint. My mother stopped bringing him up when I visited, at first awkwardly, then naturally. Then one day she called me on a Sunday morning and said, "Tell me about your week." Nothing else. No Michael, no comparison, no correction, just me. It should not have felt miraculous, but it did. A year after the gala, I stood with my mother in front of the cardiology wing. The plaque had been mounted on the north wall. Dark stone, clean lettering. The names were cut into it in a single line. Richard Goodwin, Nancy Goodwin, Beverly Goodwin. My mother read them aloud. My father's name first, then hers, then mine. She let mine sit in the air a moment longer than the others. And for once, I let that be enough. Not because it repaired everything, because not everything can be repaired, but because the truth was finally allowed to exist in the same room as my family. And that, for a woman like me, was more valuable than any dramatic reconciliation. I had spent years thinking my family needed me to be patient. What they actually needed was for me to stop helping them lie. Silence is not always grace. Sometimes silence is agreement that has gone unchallenged for too long. Sometimes it is complicity wearing good manners. And the longer you practice it, the more expensive it becomes. I learned that late, but not too late. 8 months after the gala, Michael sent me a handwritten letter, 3 pages. I read the first paragraph, folded it back up, put it in a drawer. I have not read the rest. Maybe one day I will, maybe I won't. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not a performance you owe the audience, and access is not a reward for remorse written in blue ink. I did not become a better daughter through any of this. I became something more useful. I became a daughter who could remain herself in her parents' house. That was enough. More than enough, actually, because the only version of love worth keeping is the one that doesn't require your disappearance. So if you have listened this far, let me tell you what I learned. Do not wait for your family to recognize you before you become visible to yourself. Do not wait for the perfect dinner where truth arrives gently and everyone apologizes in full paragraphs. Those dinners do not exist. And if they do, they usually happen years too late to save you from the damage of waiting for them. Also, do not confuse destruction with honesty. You do not always need to burn your life down. Sometimes you need something less dramatic and far more powerful. A fence, a gate, a key that stays in your own hand. Write down what you gave, not to cash it in, not to weaponize it, just so no one can make you forget what your love cost. Reliable women are thanked late, if they are thanked at all. And sometimes the only thank you that arrives on time is the one you finally give yourself. That one counts. It counts more than applause, more than family titles, more than framed photographs on dining room walls. It counts because it is yours. These days, every morning begins the same way. The phone goes face down. The coffee gets finished first. 8 minutes. That is the rule. Whatever the world wants from me, my mother, a colleague, a voicemail, Helena asking me to sit on another committee, Lauren texting me a photograph of her daughter on a swing set, it can wait 8 minutes. 8 minutes is not very long, but it is long enough to belong to me. My kitchen window faces east. In May, the light comes in gold. In November, it comes in silver. I still use the same heavy white cup I've had for 11 years. I still stir my coffee with the rose-handled spoon my grandmother left me. I am still 39. I'll be 40 soon, and I am not afraid of it, because I have already done the hardest thing I will ever do in this family, and the coffee is still warm. If this story found you where you live, truly found you, then you already know it was never just about the money. It was about the moment a woman stops volunteering for her own erasure. That moment does not always arrive in a ballroom. Sometimes it arrives on a Tuesday morning, sometimes over coffee, sometimes with a folder in your hand, and a sentence you can no longer afford not to say. When it comes, say it. Smooth the dress, walk to the microphone, tell the truth, and let the room rearrange itself around you, because that is the day the rest of your life begins.